and 10 save him. Now, there is a very clear connection between the ruin poster and the save them minigame from FNAF 2. The text on the screen, at least to me, indicates that what we will have to do is save Gregory from whatever situation that he's in with Freddy. Since we know that eventually he does make it to that hill that he sits on in the true ending, in the Princess Quest ending. However, it could be possible that that scene in this case is just a dream, since it's more realistic than the other endings. That could also just be because it's the true ending and it's canon, but it's currently unclear. Obviously, if it's real, we will end up being successful, but it's possible that our character, whoever she is, will die in the process. I could also be drawing weird connections between things that aren't really linked, but that's always possible when theory crafting, at literally any point, so... And at 9, Robot Gregory. This poster, in my eyes, also helps prove further that Gregory is in fact a robot, since after all we get confirmation that Vanny messes up the cameras, as you can see from the 2 screens that have Vanny on them. They're both glitching out. This is further supported by our last point, because how would Gregory be able to add a help me sign to a screen without being able to access the cameras? Nowhere on our fast watch does it say that we can add text, and Freddy clearly doesn't have the ability, since he would have used it during the section where we have to open the doors for him so that we can then be a sussy baka and vent, instead of just, you know, standing there and waving. He could have had text flashing up on screen so that we can see him easily. Multiple people I watched play this had difficulty with this section, okay? If Freddy just flashing some text on screen saying I'm here, especially when the player takes a while, would have established that he had this power, but they didn't. So unless they want to somehow retcon that in, it has to be that Gregory's controlling it. Most likely because he's a robot and he can just, like, tap into the cameras. And at 8, no more Freddy. There is also a possibility that Freddy is destroyed, or that he won't be in this DLC at all thanks to the statue we see on the poster. This poster could be an indication of what happened to Freddy after the Pizza Plex's collapse. I mean, after all, the collapse did destroy Chica, right? So why couldn't it have destroyed Freddy too? Yes, he ends up on the hill with Gregory, but like I said, that could be a dream or a heaven of sorts, or it could be years after the actual ending of the game. We can't really be certain. Or at the very least, the game could be omitting Freddy and he won't make an appearance for whatever reason, hence why the statue is destroyed. I mean, like, look at it. This thing is in pieces, but why? There isn't much rubble around it, and the escalator walls are way less damaged than this, so why would the statue have been so heavily damaged if there was nothing that actually hit it? Seems a bit sus if you ask me. And at 7, Vanny Cam. We can also see 6 monitors on the poster which have multiple images of security cameras and Gregory on them. Across the 6 monitors there are 4 total images that appear, with the bottom 2 being the odd ones out, and the 4 above that being 2 different images. One of Gregory looking surprised, and another of Vanny looking at the security camera that's glitching out. Very reminiscent of the iconic Bigfoot image that's very blurry, where he's walking like this. And I think that this is actually one of Scott's clever tricks, like how he used the keypad in Sister Location to tell us that Crying Child and FNAF 4 take place in 1983. I think that Scott or Steel Wool is doing the same thing with this poster. By glitching Vanny out on screen, they're showing us that either A, Vanny was the entity that Gregory was talking to that was mentioned in the therapy tapes, or B, that Gregory having his vision glitch out when she is nearby is due to Gregory being a robot. It could be either, but it could also be both, considering how these are both next to pictures of Gregory looking surprised, and they're on both sides of the screen. 2 pictures, 2 eyes. This is the real 2-eye theory. And at 6, brightness. As always, the first thing you do when you see any FNAF promo art or any image that's related to FNAF at all, you go and brighten it to find more details or maybe even some secrets. And the first thing that I noticed is that there aren't any question marks on this poster. Thank God. But there's also quite a few things that got revealed to me. Firstly, at the top there are actually 2 windows on the poster instead of the one that just seems to show up in the original. These windows also look like they are angry eyes, which could indicate an overarching villain. There are also a very faint set of eyes in the top right corner as well, aside not including the ones on the left that are clearly visible, but the ones on the right could just be an anomaly since they are very faint. And I also see that the girl in the middle doesn't have any color on her aside from her shoes. More on that later. And the floor also cuts off at the bottom, but the rocks on top of them don't. Mostly because at this point the ground has pretty much faded into black, but the rocks would still kind of be visible. But seriously, this girl is in black and white. Halfway through, and at number 5, collapse. One of the big questions we, or at the very least I, had after Security Breach was what part of the Pizzaplex collapsed after the cave-in during the true ending. And it was really up in the air whether it was the entire Pizzaplex or just Roxy's Raceway. I guess they kind of left it that way depending on what they wanted to do. But this poster and the title confirms that the Pizzaplex Pizzaplex itself is in ruins. The whole place is a ruin. The giant Freddy statue from the lobby is destroyed and there's rubble everywhere. There are still some questions, of course, like it is just an illustration after all. How's the rest of the Pizzaplex doing, for instance? What happened to the other animatronics? What's the main goal of this DLC? But while the latter may have been answered thanks to another detail from the poster, I don't think we'll have any answers for a while. The DLC doesn't come out until next year, which is absolutely insane, but at least it's free. And at 4 eyes. And while Gregory's eyes may be robotic, there's another set that I would like to point out in this Security Breach Ruins poster. The red eyes in the top left corner of the screen. Now, this is very clearly Vanny, but since I've seen a few people get confused by this, let me explain why. The eyes are red, which we only really see Vanny have, since Burntrap's eyes glow purple and the animatronic eyes don't really glow. We also know that Vanny might have been able to survive the collapse due to her being controlled by Aton, but also because she was able to be on the roof before us when the fire starts in the rooftop ending. I mean, she gets pushed off the roof by Freddy, but we know that she was up there before us somehow, so I'm sure that she would have found a way around a collapse. Plus, if she's on the security cameras and the other showcased person is Gregory, who we know is alive, it just makes sense for Vanny to be alive. Plus again, red eyes. And they're in a similar position to where Vanny was placed in her first poster appearance as the Shadow. You know, like the one where Freddy's rocking out and then there's like a bunny chick with a knife that we were like, who's that? Yeah, it's in roughly the same area. It's not in the same place exactly, but it's in the same vicinity. Getting close to the end of number 3, Busted Chica. Now, when I make jokes about rearranging Chica's guts, this is not what I meant. Yes, that's right, my main girl Chica also makes an appearance on this poster as probably the most resilient animatronic in the group, because she's still kicking, despite being crushed by a trash compactor and then a building, and still having most of her smoking hot bod. Some of it was removed and cracked, but her face also has seemingly melted due to possibly the fire we were using to kill Burntrap, or maybe just because a fire started in the kitchen when the building collapsed. She's also lost the lower half of her left arm, her left, not your left, remember that, don't make my mistake, and she's also lost her right leg warmer. The casing for her midriff and her right arm is gone, but other than that, she's fairly intact, at least compared to Monty. Also, interestingly enough, only Chica's white face melted, meaning that it looks like someone, spilt frosting all over her face. I guess that takes the term busted to a whole new level. But ultimately, in at number 2, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, this one is a bit wild, but hear me out. I also mentioned last time how both of these kids look like Aftons. Gregory is very clearly meant to at least be an allegory for Crying Child, okay? The stripes on the shirt, the age, the relationship with Freddy, it was right there in our faces. Whether you believe he is a robot or not, he is at least meant to represent Crying Child. And now, look at this girl. While she may be in black and white, she is still very clearly blonde. She has pigtails like Baby does, and we all know who Elizabeth ends up possessing. She's wearing a skirt exactly like Elizabeth was wearing in the one time we see her in Sister Location. I mean, if Crying Child's 2 stripes are enough for a comparison, I think this is more than enough. And then, look at her shoes. The lights are the only thing that has color on them, which is very clearly meant to have our attention. And then those lights are purple and red. Purple very clearly representing William Afton, and while last time I said that the red could be Vanny, Baby is absolutely covered in red, from the clothes to her hair. Red is all over that animatronic. Or it could be that this girl is evil, just like how Elizabeth always wants to impress her father. Just saying. It's not the craziest thing this series would have done. Okay, it would have been, okay, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Or again, they could have just been taken because they look like the kids. And finally, in at number 1, time travel. This one is crazy, I will admit, and it's most definitely not the case, but FNAF has already established time travel as possible in the very first Fazbear Frights book called Into the Pit. Remember that one? Where Oswald ends up jumping into a ball pit and somehow leaving 2011 and appearing in 1985 to witness the missing children's incident? Yeah, that story wasn't written for no reason. And where do we see the first ball pit that wasn't in a pizzeria that was simply meant to lure animatronics around? Oh, would you look at that? The Mega Pizzaplex. I'm just saying that time travel has already been established, and considering how sketchy Gregory is, I wouldn't put it passed him from being from the future or something. There are actually two key indicators that point in this direction, at least in my mind. The therapy disc, where the therapist calls client 46 out on the lies about their home life, and the fact that when he leaves the Pizzaplex in the worst ending, he sleeps in a cardboard box. The therapist in the tape says that 46, which I'm still certain is Gregory, has a great home life, but what they told their previous therapist was a lie. But if that is the case and his home life is great, despite saying his parents and him suffered some form of tragedy, how is it that he sleeps in a cardboard box? Like, his home life is great, but he sleeps in a box. Because it hasn't happened yet. The tragedy where he most likely loses his parents hasn't happened as of when the game takes place, which would mean that this girl could be Gregory's sister who came back to save him when he didn't return. Or he could be lying and instead using the name of someone he knows is a missing child in the future, which is why he can't go home. Or why the therapist describes him as writing down his past as if it was a story. Because it is a story, just not his. And 10 meaningless collectibles. While yes, the collectibles are fun things that you can go around and steal all over the Pizzaplex, I think that a DLC adding more collectibles that don't have any significance is a pretty bad idea. There are plenty of difficult to find collectibles already, so if you're to make more in a DLC, I think that they should actually have some form of meaning with those collectibles. Whether they're references or Easter eggs, it doesn't really matter, but we definitely need some form of meaning, because getting all the normal collectibles that in reality are stealables, if you ask me, is already quite the task, especially if you keep the whole like you're unable to save after getting Roxy's eyes thing, because that is just some serious bad juju if you ask me, although nobody really has asked me. We all hate the mechanic, alright? And at 9, repaired animatronics. Considering how the whole point of the game was to destroy these animatronics so that we'd end up wasting enough time for the doors to open, repairing the animatronics in this DLC for whatever reason it might be would be a huge disservice to the game. Like, yeah, you might need them for something, but if that's the case, you shouldn't have to have them repaired. Plenty of different sections in the game use both destroyed and repaired animatronics depending on how you've completed the story. If you destroyed Chica and then go to Phaser Blast after the ending, you can end up having to dance around a destroyed Chica, so forcing repairs on these animatronics just destroys what we spent the entire game doing. We did it illegally, but also considering how the game is past 6 AM and will always be 6 AM no matter how long you play at that point, you can be fairly certain that they would not be able to repair the animatronics in time. And it ain't bug fixes. Okay, now don't get me wrong, this game is in dire need of some serious bug fixes, but I, along with I'm sure everyone else, would be absolutely furious if those bug fixes came in the form of a DLC. At least if the DLC is a separate purchase that we have to make like the Help Wanted DLC was. If I have to pay for bug fixes that I should have already had, there's going to be a problem, because if a game is released unfinished, there needs to be a remedy to that in the form of updates. Easy updates that fix the major issues with the game, like I don't know, falling through the world. And if there is a paywall to get those updates, I think I know a couple of websites that can help me get around that, because in all honesty, that's incredibly messed up if the bug fixes will only be in the DLC. But I don't think Steelwood would do that. I just get worried since they're still working on updates but also still talking DLC. And it's 1 year later. With the DLC not releasing until 2023, the question remains of when in the timeline it will take place. Yes, it will take place after the true ending for Security Breach, but how long after the true ending is the question. See, with the state of the animatronics, it seems that it could be later on, and the release date being 2 years after the release of the original game means that it could be linear in the timeline sense, so it could also take place 2 years after the ending. But that would then bring on the question of why is Gregory back there if it's a year or two later? But then we also have to ask who is this girl and where they came from if we're really going to know this answer. So while there are theories, this one specifically coming from Amanda because of the release date, we still don't know for sure until we have some more information. Time to wait another 6 months before another teaser. And at 6, Chica Graffiti. While zooming in on Chica like I always do, I did notice that her torso seems to have traces of red on it. Now what this is in reality is definitely unclear, but it could be graffiti, indicating that this could be later on in the timeline. She could have been decommissioned for a while after being revived for whatever purpose, and maybe some kids got to her and decided to spray paint her. or more likely it's actually pizza sauce. See, brightening the image while basic FNAF at this point is also still helpful, and I used it in the last Ruins video. However, while the red is evident on the normal poster, by brightening you can actually see that there is yellow dripping from Chica's face, and unless Chica started listening to Bear Grylls in order to survive the collapse of the Pizzaplex, I'm pretty sure that it's melted cheese dripping from her mouth, which would also explain the red in tandem. I mean, it could be her beak, but like, we were trying to explain the red, so cheese makes sense. Like I said, it would mean that the red stuff would then be pizza sauce and potentially pepperoni or some other form of meat that the Pizzaplex kitchen would add on pizza. But it could also be blood. Not sure from who, but maybe Chica saved Vanny's life or something. Also, I was at Niagara Comic-Con 2 days ago, and there was a girl dressed as Chica. Didn't know who I was. It was kind of offensive. It was really humbling. Halfway through, into number 5, the FNAF ARG. This was brought up in a recent MatPat FNAF theory, and people are starting to suggest that it's going to be involved in this DLC. The basic idea that the FNAF Fazbear Frights books were originally going to have an ARG that Scott ended up cutting out for whatever reason, and then released part of it in the Felix the Shark book 12. However, I'm here to tell you guys that it's not real, okay? Scott has said on multiple occasions that he doesn't want to cross the line between fact and fiction, and that he wants to keep the two worlds separate, probably because FNAF relates so closely to Chuck E. Cheese. And that's also why he wouldn't really make a real FNAF location, okay? He stuck to this so hard that he didn't even make a website for the indie game dev introduced in FNAF VR like he wanted to, because he thought that it would be too fuzzy for the line, okay? So, look. There is no FNAF ARG, okay? If a website is too much, there is no bigger quest here. Last time we thought this, there was a restaurant that got harassed, and a pizzeria owner who just so happened to be named Mike also got harassed. So please, don't go out searching. If there was an ARG, I'm sure Scott would have said something about it, okay? So don't harass anyone, just stick to the games and the game files. Crack open FNAF 3's mobile game if you want to see if there's the image there. Just leave the real world locations and people alone. And at 4, simulation. It's also worth mentioning that there are multiple instances on the poster that feel unfinished. Now, I don't know if this was because the poster was rushed, which has seemingly been a trend with FNAF recently, or because they're simply mistakes, but I wanted to point out in case it has bigger implications. Like when I mentioned the last time we talked about this, the floor at the bottom actually cuts off, but the rocks on top of the floor don't. Mostly because at this point the ground without brightening had mostly faded into black, but the rock was still kind of visible. However, even unbrightened, you can see the clear divide between the tile and just pure black. You can also see that on the left, the floor does the same. And this is very clear in the original poster, okay? I mean, like, there's even a glowing rock sitting at the border. Oh, it's like glowing because it has reflecting light on it, but it also kind of reminds me of when an item is important, so it's highlighted in the game even if it makes it unrealistic. But the most interesting part in my eyes is the tree on the far right. The one in the back next to the escalator. The bottom 2 sections of it are blank, like they're just filled in with a black outline and then solid brown color. Like the artist had finished the color blocking and then forgot to finish the tree despite doing the rest of that tree. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but if it is, then could this be pointing to the entire thing being a simulation? Which would then bring up the question of how and who. Like maybe this is what Vanny is seeing in her head while Glitchtrap was taken over, so that she's still like the good guy in her head, so she's not fighting back against Glitchtrap's control. Or maybe it's Gregory still caught in his dream that started in 1983. Penultimately, in at number 2, more Pizzaplex. Okay, so the Pizzaplex is already pretty damn big. It's confusing to get the places you need to go. There are a couple shortcuts, but it is still difficult to get to certain places. I personally end up going probably the most complicated ways to get back to the main atrium and the like, because I can't be bothered trying to find my way around. But going through the Rockstar row vents to get down to parts and service through Roxy's room is the one way I know works. However, adding more sections to the already confusing Pizzaplex could do more harm than good, and when it comes to something like this, you can't really add a different world space unless you make the story way too complicated. With something like Skyrim, the Forgotten Vale and Solstheim makes sense. However, with FNAF, you can't really have a whole separate area because the whole game takes place in a Pizzaplex and not a specific province of a whole established world. So, more Pizzaplex, while potentially making sense, could end up being counterproductive, especially depending on where we need to go. Maybe use spaces that we've already been in, or add fast travel. And finally, in at number 1, cash grab. The biggest concern that I have with a security breach DLC is the possibility of the DLC just really being a cash grab. And while most DLCs could be considered cash grabs, it's really a risk with FNAF in general, especially being new to DLC, like they only have had like one. And like previously mentioned, the confines of the Plex. If it was something simple like mini games or multiplayer possibilities, I could see it, but the game was already $50. Add on to that the $25 or so that the DLC would run for, and you have the price of some of the highest end games, especially new games. So if there isn't enough content to justify that, I'd be worried about the future for the series, especially since we don't really know the motivations of the person taking over next, because we don't know who is taking over next. It's a slippery slope with a cash grab DLC, and honestly, if there's not enough content or mystery to justify the purchase, I'm probably not going to be purchasing it, despite being a FNAF tuber at this point. Yeah, that's what my life has come to. God damn it. At 10, Ruin. We know that the main title of the DLC is going to be Ruin. Now, whether this will be referencing my opinion of the series or the actual state of the Plex is unknown, but based on the poster, it's possibly both, because the Plex looks absolutely destroyed. The Freddy statue from the lobby is in pieces, and there is plenty of rubble all over the ground, and you can see the walls next to the escalators are actually pretty banged up. It's not clear if this is exactly how the lobby will look, since this is just an illustration, not a screenshot from the game, but it is still possible. They could design the damage around this poster, or they could have taken a screenshot and then had someone illustrate it instead, which is entirely possible. But given that this is going to be released in 2023, I doubt that they have stuff made properly for it. They may still be working out the storyline at this stage. And at 9, Free. The name of the DLC may be Ruin, but I'm damn glad it won't ruin my wallet. Especially when the main game was oddly enough in ruins and still cost me $50. And this was before I started buying cheap frozen meals to feed myself, so I was pretty broke. But honestly, I'm pretty glad that this DLC is free, especially with the amount of mods that are probably going to come from it. And it's also probably an attempted apology from Steel Wool since, like I said, the original game was so busted and unfinished when it originally came out. Did you know that despite being incomplete, the original game uncompressed was 86 gigabytes? That's a bigger game size than Skyrim, for God's sakes. That's around the game size, or like a file size, or maybe even a little more than Grand Theft Auto 5. That's absolutely insane. And now it's around 62 uncompressed, which is nicer, and it's 41 compressed. But still, goddamn, that's a lot for not that big of a game when you really think about it. And at 8, 2023. Yes, as I said earlier, the DLC will not be releasing until 2023, which is unfortunate, but it could actually be a good thing. Firstly, it gives me at least another 8 months of DLC themed content before it actually releases, if it is released in January and then the hype dies down for it. But it could also mean that the DLC will be even bigger and better than any previous one, like adding just a couple of more nightmare animatronics or a couple of more levels. However, this also raises the question of, is this the case, or are they just taking their sweet time because all of this is a free DLC? Like, can we really expect to play something huge for free? I doubt it. Like, the only reason it might be free though is because it's affiliated with Scott. But after Scott stepping down, I don't really know how Steel Wool would handle this kind of thing if they were doing it on their own, so I can't really say for sure. And at 7, Daycare. The Moondrop Daycare section was certainly a great bit of fun, despite the constant darkness and the demon chasing you. It was strangely like my mind, actually. However, while this section was certainly fun and one of the best moments of the game, I don't really want to repeat it. It took me so long to do properly the first time, so any reason to have to go back into the daycare, whether it be because we dropped something or whatever other reason they'd come up with, I don't want to do it. Do not send me back to the goddamn daycare, or I swear to God. Like, it was fun the first time, but I'd rather not spend another 3 hours nearly ripping my dick off trying to find another generator. I don't want to deal with the daycare attendant at all, if that's possible. Just the fact that the first line as Moondrop is naughty naughty boy, it puts me on edge, especially for a kid who's like the size of a 4-year-old. Not in real life. I'm taller than a 4-year-old, I hope. Like, okay, look, it's just setting off all kinds of radars, alright? And at 6, post-credits. While yes, I said another ending would be nice in another video, having any post-credit scenes should really be saved for the next full game, especially since we don't know where the next IP owner will be going with this series. So I'd like to leave the endings where they are, and any DLC should take place before the game starts or after 6 AM hits, since 6 AM seems to be the most logical time for any serious change to happen, since employees would be starting to come back and prepare for the day. day, so things like additional areas or attractions opening would make sense. Basically, the daytime protocols would activate. Or it could be like a DLC starts if you go to the main stage when Vanessa asks you to when you're trying to leave. When you're trying to get to the main doors while the daycare attendant's chasing you and she says, oh, come to the main stage. Yeah, that could do that. And it could start like a whole new story kind of mission with, wait for it, autosaves. That would be amazing. Someone in a recent video also mentioned that there's unused Freddy voice lines that say that the stations got hacked. However, firstly, that means nothing since it's unused, therefore it's not canon. Secondly, it still makes no sense, because if he's able to escape, why have the save stations? Like, why hack them at all? It doesn't really make sense unless you want to screw with the business, since in the world of the game, the save stations do nothing for Gregory. They only help us in the game sense. Do you get it? Halfway through into number 5, post-game. Honestly, I'm fine with the DLC taking place post-game, and it would make the most sense. However, I don't want to see a post-game DLC where you can't save the entire time. And that's what I fear the most when it comes to Security Breach, okay? If we're getting a whole new section of the game, basically a new game in and of itself, we'd better be able to save throughout it, which Steelwool might see as actually compromising the intended difficulty of the post-game, so I don't know what they're going to do. I had to put it out there again. If this is going to be some post-game DLC, you need to make sure that saving is allowed, even if the save spots are only available like in the sections pertaining to the DLC while the DLC is active or something like that, because otherwise it's going to be too much of a pain in the ass to actually get through. And I don't know how many people will actually want to play it if it's that way. Rather, they'd probably end up just wanting to watch someone else play it, which is fine if the person you're watching play it is me. And at 4, questions. When we get this DLC, if they do end up making one at least, I don't want to be left with more questions than we had at the end of the main game, alright? Scott loves to clear things up from previous games with the next one, and a DLC is a perfect way to do this. And he did this with FNAF ARG and its Curse of Dreadbear DLC, with confirming that Glitch Trap was meant to be Afton. So, if we come out of this DLC with more questions than answers, while in typical FNAF fashion, I'm still not going to be a happy overnight camper. Like, bro, can you just like throw us a bone once and tell us like one of the big mysteries we have, or give us answers for that, like how Gregory and Vanessa know each other seemingly, or if Gregory is a robot, or who Client 46 is. Please, just give me that instead of questions, and I'll be happy. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Prisoner. Now time to get to some theories about our Blondie in the middle. Who is she? I made it a point last time to mention that she looked an awful lot like the middle silhouette of the 9 children who ended up going missing due to Vanny, and I still stand by that point. So the most realistic answer I have is that the missing children weren't actually dead, but they were rather trapped inside the building somewhere. Much like how Vanny in the very first trailer for the game said, Gregory, your friends are here with me.
Gregory, your friends are worried about you. They're here with me. Please come out.
So clearly, Gregory must have known these children, right? Which explains why he came to the Plex in the first place, but it doesn't explain how he never mentions them. Either way, this is a very real possibility that this blonde girl is just a missing child who, thanks to the collapse of the Plex, managed to escape containment. But ultimately, in at number 2, Help Me. Very reminiscent of the Save Them minigame from the earlier FNAF games, I'm pretty sure it's FNAF 2. You can see Gregory's face on the bottom left monitor with the phrase "Help Me" underscore written in green lettering. This seems to me to indicate that we may have a potential plot idea brewing where we need to save Gregory and Freddy after the collapse of the Plex, but we know that Gregory and Freddy sit on the hill in the final shot alone in the true ending, meaning that if we do end up having to save him, our player character will most likely die in the process. This also means that we will not be playing as Gregory, but more on that in a moment. The underscore here could also be another indication of Gregory being a robot, but it could also potentially just be a reference to a file within the main game or within the DLC that could contain some secret information. But I have no idea if that's true. That's just speculation for the time being. I'm gonna have to look in through the actual Security Breach game files before the game comes out to see if there was an update that added one of those files, since underscores are primarily used for putting spaces in file names without actually needing spaces. Or it just could be that we need help in this case. Finally, in at number 1, Blondie. We do also see a new character on this poster, one we have never seen before. The little blonde girl holding the flashlight that is illuminating this entire scene. She's short, blonde, and wearing light up Skechers like the girl boss she is. But she is also presumably our player character given that she is front and center. Now as to whether we are looking for Gregory or if Gregory is looking for us is one thing, but I have a slightly wild idea that could help explain. The pigtails is very reminiscent of Baby, but this girl has blonde hair. And while we may not be able to see her face, I think that she may also have green eyes, because anyone with blonde hair makes me instantly think of Elizabeth Aton, who gets grabbed by Baby in 1983 and goes on to possess the animatronic. Now, given that we've made the comparisons of Gregory to Crying Child in the past, and the very familiar nature of this blonde girl, I think I have a reason why all these children have gone missing. Because they look like the original Aton children. Think about it. This girl looks a lot like the middle silhouette from the original Missing Children's article in The Worst Ending for Security Breach, and the rest of these children look similar to each other, at least using their silhouettes, because that's all we really have. Plus, look at her light up Skechers, okay? Red and purple lights. I'm sorry, but when have we seen purple and it hasn't been an indication of Aton? Plus, the red is exactly like Vanny's eyes. This has to be one of the 9 missing children, right? That got released thanks to the collapse of the Pizza Plex? Like, come on. That has to be it.